earliest time possible, which would be 7:30. There are some people who have even complained to us and said, why are you starting so early? You're so late, the Seder. Now, I do always joke that no matter what time you start the Seder, once you start reading the Haggadah, when you're about 1 minute in, people start rolling their eyes and say, oh my God, this is so long, right? That always happens anyways. So I learned pretty quickly when making public Seders that you have to just not really care what people think and go forward with it, because otherwise, I always found it unique that when I always found it very unique that when it comes to the, when Gentiles come to the Seder, they always want to stay later and have questions. But Jews, it always 1 minute after we start reading the Haggadah, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so late. It's like, really? Do you usually go to sleep at 7:45? It is Prescott. People go to sleep early. But anyways, so this year, I'll just tell you some unique things about this year. And I wanted to talk about that. It's actually, this is, by the way, being recorded, but no one can see you. It's going to be on YouTube. So the first thing is, this is what we typically do on a regular year. The night before Passover, we check our house for chametz. Have you ever done that before?
Yeah.
Yeah, you check our house for chametz. And traditionally, what we're supposed to do is put out some bread or little pieces of bread, and we make a blessing. It's a mitzvah to do the search. Then what we do is we collect it, and the next morning before midday, we burn it. This year, midday is about 11:33, right? You burn it the next day. Then when you burn it, actually, an hour before you burn it, it's forbidden to eat leavened products. So when you said, when does Passover start? It sort of starts then, the midday before Passover, because that's when you're not allowed to eat leavened products. Usually the schedule is, and the Jewish laws, you're not allowed to, you're not supposed to do certain works. You're not supposed to work on your car. 1 second. All right. So what we do is we burn it, and then during that day, you're not supposed to work on your car. You're not supposed to do any big work. And the reason is because that was the time in the olden days that we would do the Paschal lamb. We would all go to Jerusalem and sacrifice the Paschal lamb. The way it works is on Passover, when coming to Passover nowadays, we don't work to commemorate that, but we are allowed to work. So that's usually the day where you prepare for the Seder. You set the tables, you put out all the stuff, you make sure all the last things you need to buy. That is what we usually do the day before Passover. This year is unique because the day before Passover is Shabbos. So you obviously can't work, you can't cook. You're not even allowed to set the tables for the Seder the whole day, right? So what do we do on this year? This year, what we do, now there's another interesting thing that's going to occur this year. We have a 3-day holiday. Now in Israel, they have one Seder, right? And it's a 1-day holiday. We have 2 Seders, so it's a 2-day holiday, right? And in Israel, whenever they have a 2-day holiday, they really complain like crazy. 2 days, so long, but we always have a 2-day. This year in Israel, they're having a 2-day because the first day is Shabbos. In other words, those are 2 days that you can't work, you can't answer the phone, you can't, read the news or whatever it is. This year, for us, it's actually outside of Israel, it's going to be 3 days. And the reason why it's going to be 3 days is because we have Shabbos, Friday night Shabbos, Sunday, and Monday. And we have 2 Seders in there and everything like that. So what we are going to do this year is we check for the chametz on Thursday night. Then Friday morning, we burn the chametz. We burn the chametz Friday morning, but we're still allowed to eat it. Now this gets, if it was our choice, we wouldn't eat it anymore. It would be a lot simpler. But the rule is on Shabbat, you have to have 2 challahs at every meal. You aware of that? The Torah tells us that the Jewish people in the desert, they got the manna, right? And it fell every day except for Saturday. So what do they eat Saturday? It fell double on Friday.
Right.
Therefore, on Friday night, the Jewish law is to commemorate that we have to eat 2 loaves of challah on Friday night and 2 loaves on Shabbat morning. Now, this gets very difficult because we want to get rid of our chametz. We want to get rid of our leavened products. We have to sell it by Friday day, midday. We want to have it sold already, and we want to be ready for Passover. But on Shabbos, you have to eat these 2 challahs, right? So what do? This is a very technical thing that every community struggles with this year. What would be easy to do is if you could eat matzah instead. According to Jewish law, matzah is equivalent to challah. It's bread. It's considered bread. It's a cracker bread, but it's considered bread. The problem is it is forbidden to eat matzah before Passover, the day before Passover. And the reason why it's forbidden is because you're supposed to, some people like matzah, some people don't like matzah. But either way, you're supposed to come into Pesach eating matzah and saying, wow, this is good. And if you didn't eat it for the whole day, many people actually wait 30 days. They don't eat matzah for 30 days before Passover. And hopefully you'll come into the day and say, oh, okay, this is good, right? So you're not allowed to eat matzah the day before. So we have this paradox. On one hand, we want to clean everything. We're not allowed to clean any more on Saturday. Everything has to be put away. We're starting Passover a day earlier with regard to leavened products. On the other hand, we need to eat some bread at the Shabbat meal. So what do? Anyone can guess? Not all at once. So here's what we do. Friday night, what traditionally Jews do is they try and get the least crummy bread, and they try and eat it in a place, maybe sometimes in your backyard or in your front yard, eaten in a place where it won't be hard to clean. And you eat it separate from the meal. You make a Pesach meal. All the food is kosher for Passover, same stuff that you eat on Passover. You can add some things if you'd like, but all kosher for Passover on Friday night. And then you eat the matzah. You eat some bread in another room or in a safe place or carefully on a tablecloth. Get rid of the tablecloth. And then you eat the rest of the meal. The same thing goes on Shabbat morning. Now, at Shabbat morning at 10:30, you're no longer allowed to eat chametz, because that's the day before Passover. You're not allowed, it's forbidden. The Torah says halfway through the day before Passover, you can't eat leavened products. So you got to eat your Shabbat meal before 10:30 on Saturday. So what does everyone do? And what we're actually doing this year, and surprisingly, we're actually planning on having a minyan. We're going to daven, we're going to have our minyan at 7:30 a.m. 7:30 a.m. Saturday morning. Then that way we can finish around 9:30, and there's enough time to eat bread before 10:30. Now on Friday, we burn the chametz on Friday, the day before, but now we have a different problem. Now we have chametz left over. We have this bread that we're eating. A lot of times, I remember when I was a kid, if I remember correctly, we use like bagels, because bagels usually don't crumb so much. They're kind of, but now what do? We have this bread, right? And we're eating it Saturday morning, and we're not allowed to burn the leftovers. So what do you do with the leftovers of the bread? So this is a very interesting thing. I know Jerry always likes technology. What most people do is they flush it down the toilet, right? Because that's a way. Now, burning chametz is the best way of getting rid of it, because when you burn something, it becomes nothing. It really becomes ash. But the second best option is you can make it into crumbs and put it into your backyard, or you can flush it down the toilet, and that chametz no longer belongs to you. Now, that is what we need to do on Saturday morning. So Saturday morning, people will be getting up at 7:30 a.m. We're going to pray here, 7:30 a.m. And then we're going to pray, and then quickly, before 10:30, eat our challah, or whatever it is, any 2 loaves of bread. You don't actually need challah for Shabbat. You can use matzah on a regular week, but this week doesn't work because you're not allowed to eat matzah right before Passover. Or we use bagels or any type, people use pitas. Someone was telling me that in LA, there's a Persian type of bread that they actually sell in Trader Joe's here, which is, it's called lavash. It's like paper thin bread. And they use that. And so that's what they were telling me. And that's what we do Shabbat morning. Then Shabbat morning at 10:30. So, some people, what they'll do is they'll actually eat outside. They'll find a place in their house so they could easily sweep up, shake off their clothing. At 10:30, they will flush the rest down the toilet. Those are basically the laws. Then you have this long day. The day before Passover is actually my birthday. You have this long day because you ate your Shabbat meal. Usually we pray about 10 and we eat about 12:31. But here we'll have already eaten early in the morning, this long day, and you're not allowed to prepare for the Seder. So besides buying things or anything like that, you're not allowed to. In Jewish law, you're not even allowed to take a nap to be up at the Seder. You're allowed to take a nap, but you should just not think about it too much and not assume that you're taking a nap in order to stay for the Seder, because we're not allowed to prepare for Shabbat. Now, we're going to do something very special here. People have been RSVPing to the Seder. I'm trying to keep it to amount to people that I feel people aren't touching cheeks, touching elbows. So that way we can kind of have airflow and people feel comfortable. Most of the people are vaccinated or got sick, but I can't guarantee anything. So no one can guarantee anything these days. But we're gonna try and start the Seder as soon as possible. That means at 7:25. So we're gonna try and set the tables on Friday, put them aside, so that way we can just move them in right away and start the Seder right away. In the Jewish communities, on the other hand, the big Jewish communities, most people will be starting the Seder probably an hour after Shabbat ends, because you got to put stuff on to heat it up, to get warm, and you got to prepare the table and everything. You're not meant to do any of that during Shabbat day. So those are the rules. So just to sum it up. And now one more thing. Is anyone here a firstborn? Jerry, are you a firstborn?
Nope.
David, are you a firstborn? No, he's not. He has an older brother.
Yes, no.
Steve is older than you. Okay, yeah. Well, here's the rule. A lot of people don't know, but firstborns have a special fast that they are supposed to fast at. The firstborns are supposed to fast the day before Passover. Anyone ever heard of the fast of the firstborns?
No.
All right. So firstborns are supposed to fast Erev Pesach, the morning of the Seder. Why do they fast? Can anyone guess? Well, it's a little confusing, but they fast because they were spared from the plague of the killing of the firstborn. Yeah, they fast because of that. Now, it's a very interesting tradition, and there's a lot of questions people have on it. In other words, was God going to kill the Jewish firstborns? What did they do? And there's a lot of commentary on exactly how the plague happened, that Jewish people were in fact spared. Now, the rule is I never had to fast my whole life. I have older siblings. But if you have a firstborn son, you actually need to fast for him. You actually need to fast for him. So the day before Passover, which is my birthday, is actually a fast day for me because I have a firstborn son. However, luckily, the rabbis gave a loophole. Here is how you get out of fasting. The way you get out of fasting is if you have a mitzvah meal. A mitzvah meal on the day of the plague of the firstborns, you don't have to fast. Now, how do you have a mitzvah meal? The way you have a mitzvah meal is you attend or you listen to someone finishing a tractate of the Talmud. When you finish a tractate of the Talmud, you're supposed to make a party. We actually never made a party for our Talmud class because we kind of were like preparing, and then we came into COVID and everything like that. You're supposed to make a party. And when you finish it, you actually make a party, and you're allowed to eat on the day of the fast of the firstborns. So what we do nowadays is everyone goes to synagogue, all the firstborns, even if they usually sleep in Pesach morning. Pesach morning is the Erev Pesach morning is a very busy day. You see, they all turn up to synagogue, right? Because they don't want to fast. Now, it is a mitzvah to hear what they call a siyum. A siyum means the end of a study of a book of Talmud, in order that you can break your fast. Some of the commentaries actually say that the fast of the firstborns commemorates the miracle of the plague of the firstborns. And when we do a siyum, when we make a meal, a festive meal, because when we make a festive meal, because we finish a tractate, that's another way of commemorating God's miracle. There was another great miracle that happened with the firstborns, and I'll just tell you about that in a moment. But what happened is truthfully, we should fast on the first day of Passover, because that's when the plague of the firstborn happened at midnight, right? But you're not allowed to fast on the holiday. So you fast the day before. However, this year it becomes unique. You're not allowed to fast on Shabbat, right? So you're not allowed to, forbidden to fast on Shabbat. The only rare times you can fast on Shabbat is when Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbat, right? That's the only time the Torah says. But otherwise, you're not allowed to. In the olden days, people would have all sorts of self-imposed fast days. People used to fast on yard sites. If someone had a bad dream, sometimes they would want to fast. If someone felt that life was difficult, they would fast. If sometimes someone felt that they sinned or something like that, they wanted to have some sort of atonement, they would fast, right? Nowadays, it's funny how Jews are so into food, right? When we used to fast so much. But now what we do is we can't fast on Friday either, because Friday's the day where we have a mitzvah to prepare for Shabbat. So you're allowed to technically fast, but the rabbis didn't want to give a public fast day on Friday this year. Because again, the day of the fast day is actually Shabbat, and it's forbidden to fast. So to this year, the fast day is on Thursday. On Thursday, it's traditional to fast this year. We push it off even a day earlier. The Rebbe once asked a question. He said, really, the fast day should be on Shabbos, right? But we don't fast on Shabbos. So it's on Friday, but we don't want to make a group fast day on Friday. So we do it on Thursday. But really, it should be on Friday. What if a boy becomes bar mitzvah on Friday this year? Right? So that's technically the day he should fast. Should he have fasted the day before while he's 12? Or should he fast privately? And the Rebbe asked the question, and ultimately he said he should fast the day before when he's 12, which is very unique. My bar mitzvah was actually exactly like this year on Shabbat, Shabbat of the 14th of Nisan. Erev Pesach was on Shabbat. That's the year of my bar mitzvah, 20 years ago. That was how my bar mitzvah worked out. However, I wasn't a firstborn, so I didn't have this question. So on Thursday morning now, we luckily have the opportunity that you can listen to Steve all over the world on the phone. You can listen to people finishing tractates. There were times I remember that different people, they would stay up the whole night before finishing a tractate of the Talmud. Or I was a yeshiva student at the time, and I'd be home in Northern California, and someone would say, hey, are you able to finish this tractate of Talmud? They'd say, are you able to finish something before tomorrow morning? And I remember one year actually staying up till 3, 4 in the morning, finishing it. So I would be able to make a siyum, and that way people will be able to break their fast. Now there's so those are the laws of this year. So everyone's going to want to, I know that you guys already sold your chametz. David, don't forget to sell your chametz. That's got to be done before Friday midday, preferably. There's some rabbis who are able to knock it off in a different way, that it's done on Saturday, but it's better to do it before Friday, because Friday is just to be safe. We also burn the chametz on Friday. Now, why do we burn the chametz on Friday if we could still eat it? Now, this is kind of funny. Usually when you burn the chametz, you're not allowed to eat it anymore. Phyllis, have you ever been here when we burn the chametz?
No, I've done it myself, but
okay, I think Myra's been here. Myra's been here when we did it.
I don't think I was there.
All right. So it's usually very interesting. Usually on the 5th hour, which this year will be about 10:30, it's forbidden to eat chametz. And then an hour later, you burn it. You burn your leftover chametz. This year has a very unique nuance. Technically, we shouldn't have to burn it on Friday, right? So the rabbi said we should nonetheless burn it on Friday, so we don't mix up next year. We don't want our kids or ourselves say, yeah, I think I got rid of it 5 p.m. or you don't really have to do it so much. We do it at midday in order to remind ourselves. What's unique about this is this year we can actually eat chametz afterwards, right? So we burn the chametz and we get rid of the chametz. We say a special prayer, and then you could literally be eating a sandwich while you're burning it, right? But we burn it to commemorate. Now, there are different opinions. Some rabbis say you should not eat any chametz after Friday, unless except for on Shabbos, you got to eat a little bit of challah. But other rabbis say, no, you can't make the differences like that. So the schedule this year, just to Thursday night, we search the chametz. Friday midday, we burn the chametz. And then Saturday in the morning, I actually saw in the morning by 10:30, you have to get rid of all your chametz. You're not allowed to take your chametz. Let's say you're eating challah and you have a cupboard, and all the inside that cupboard is all your leavened products which you had sold to a Gentile. You're not allowed to take it and put it in there, because after it was sold, you still had this chametz which belongs to you. So anything belongs to you, you have to get rid of. So this is interesting for those who drink scotch on Pesach and everything like that. It gets a little tricky. I mean, some people cannot go a Shabbos. Sorry, those who drink, you can't drink scotch on Pesach. Those who drink alcohol on Shabbos, like myself, you have to be careful. If you have a bottle, someone on Purim brought us a bottle of Glenlivet 18. It was a very expensive bottle. If you have that bottle and you're drinking it and it's 10:30, you probably need to pour that bottle out. Unless you take a little bit before Shabbos in a water bottle or something like that, you put the rest in your cupboard and you drink and you finish the whole thing. On another interesting note, the Rebbe a lot of times would give out l'chaim to people. And he'd give a special blessing to them and give them a little alcohol. And sometimes he would give bottles. And the tradition is something that comes from a Rebbe, you don't sell. You have to finish it before Passover. You don't sell it. It's very holy, and you don't sell it. You don't want it not to belong to you. So there's actually one more bottle of alcohol that people have from the Rebbe, which was actually given to a Gentile. So that's no problem, right? If you don't sell your chametz, this is an interesting thing. If you don't sell your chametz, what happens is all your alcohol and everything is forbidden to use after Passover. Any chametz that you have on Passover is forbidden to eat afterwards. So that's why it's so important to sell your chametz. So anyways, there was a chassid who remembered that he had a bottle from the Rebbe, and there was only 1 hour left till he had to get rid of his chametz. So he drank the whole thing, right? He drank the whole thing. Now, there's actually one fascinating story. You can see it online. This is a really beautiful story. One of the biggest beer distributors in New York, perhaps in America, lives in New York, and he distributes a lot of the beer, which means he owns a lot of the beer and alcohol in America. Now, what happens is he owns it over Passover. So it would be forbidden to get benefit from it, to buy it. You're not allowed to get benefit from leavened products, which were owned by a Jew on Passover. So a rabbi realized, he said, wow, this is a major problem. If we buy beer after Passover, we're buying beer that was owned by a Jew, because this major distribution company is owned by a Jew and it's forbidden to drink it. So for years and years, they were trying to convince him to sell his chametz. And just finally, a couple of years ago, a lot of people don't understand the importance, or how insignificant, it's not going to affect your life that much. He finally sold it. And now it's become really cute. Every year, he's very well-known, very wealthy man. He has a bunch of rabbis come and they sell his chametz. And then he always makes a donation. So this year, but always a unique donation. This year, he's donating all the alcohol used to celebrate the Rebbe's birthday this Wednesday. This Wednesday is the Rebbe's birthday. And there's a lot of interesting things which are celebrated, but all the alcohol in Crown Heights is being donated by him. Okay, we'll check. All right, so that is another interesting thing. So that's why it's important to sell the chametz, and that is how we are going to do Passover this year. So yeah, bear with us if you're coming to the Seder. It'll probably start a little bit late, but hopefully not later than it usually starts. Okay.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. When Shabbat, the Shabbat that falls during Pesach, are you supposed to have challah on that Shabbat as well?
No, see, matzah is equivalent to challah.
Right.
From a halachic Jewish standpoint, matzah is the same thing as challah, or any bread for that matter, is the same thing as challah, so as long as it didn't rise, right? So, hey, Steve, how are you? I just heard you downstairs.
So this is what you're talking about is only, the exception is this Shabbat, which falls when the Seder starts. So you still have to have that challah or bread on Friday night and on Saturday morning.
So it's actually a funny thing. Any Shabbos during the year, you can use challah or matzah as your two breads. And again, Friday night and Shabbat morning, you have to make a blessing on 2 loaves of bread. Any Shabbat of the year, you could use challah or matzah, except for this one. You're not allowed to eat matzah before Passover, and you're barely allowed to eat bread. You're barely allowed to eat bread. So what you do is you do it very carefully. We do it here. We're going to have a minyan this Shabbos at 7:30 a.m., right? 7:30 a.m. All synagogues in the world. In fact, I saw in one of these books, I saw a response that what if you wake up late and you wake up and it's already past 10:30? What do you do? Right? What do? You can't eat challah anymore. You can't make the special blessing. There's a lot of different opinions of how to make the exact meal. What we personally do is we're going to eat a little bit of challah in the morning, or probably we'll buy something like bagels or something like that used for challah. Eat a little bit, flush the rest down the toilet, and then we can. When you flush it down, you say a special prayer, the same prayer you would say when you burn it, and then what you do is you go and you relax because it's Shabbos. You're not allowed to prepare for the Seder next Saturday. So yeah, that's exactly it. It's a very kind of paradoxical Shabbos, very unique Shabbos. Another thing about that Shabbos, I just want to mention a very interesting thing. It's called Shabbat HaGadol, the Great Shabbos. That's called the Great Shabbos. The Shabbat before Passover is called the Great Shabbos. Why is the Shabbat before Passover called the Great Shabbat? Well, the main reason is it is the Shabbat where what happened was there was this great miracle happened on the Shabbat before Passover when the Jews were in Egypt. Moses had warned the Egyptians that the death of the firstborn was imminent. So what do you think the firstborns did? They waged war against Egypt. There was a civil war, a very large civil war before the final plague, because they said, hey, they said there's going to be blood. There was blood. There's the frogs, et cetera, et cetera. You guys aren't going to die. You're not firstborn, but we're firstborn. Let the Jewish people out. There was a very large civil war, and it was right before Passover, and we celebrate that on the Shabbat before Passover. It's a miracle that happens. We always like to be grateful for every miracle that happens to the Jewish people. That is Shabbat HaGadol. Another reason why it's called Shabbat HaGadol is in the olden days, rabbis used to give a long speech, a very long speech on the Shabbat before Passover. Why would they give such a long speech? Because back then we didn't have the internet, we didn't have videos, we didn't have phones. People needed to know the laws of Passover. Books were scarce. So what they did is they had a rabbi go through the laws of Passover, the Shabbat before. This year, the rabbi does not go because he's too much of a rush in the morning. Some people do it in the afternoon, and some people do it the Shabbat before. But either way, it's what happened actually historically is because books started being published, and now you can get all the rules of Passover in a phone app. They have a phone app that has literally every product kosher for Passover. When I mean every product, it says what types of shampoos are kosher for Passover, what types of shampoos are not kosher for Passover, right? You can get that in a phone app now. So rabbis usually give like inspirational speeches. Some of the great rabbis make fun of that. They say, there's no need for that, but it's nice to gather Jews together and give a talk to them. That is what we do the Shabbat before. This year, it is right before Passover. Okay, so now I want to talk about Shmura Matzah. I want to talk about it and a couple other details in Passover. I got this great new Haggadah that, I'll share some things next week. It's about 1,000 pages long. Really great Haggadah. It's in Hebrew, and I've really been reading a lot of it. It's very, very
You're not
fascinating.
using that, are you, Rabbi?
What?
You're not using a 1,000-page Haggadah for Seder, are you?
Oh, I can go really fast, Jerry. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, wake me
We'll
up.
bring our pillows.
I'm not using it, but I'm going through, and there's a couple interesting things that I actually wanted to feature last year at the Seder, but I'm going to do this year. Last year at the Seder, a lot of us did Seders at home, and most people this year are doing Seders at home. It's always beautiful to get a large crowd and everything, but I haven't been really pushing it so strong this year, just because I know, Corona is kind of like Passover. Everyone has different levels of adherence, and we don't talk about it. You don't ask too much because you don't want to, Well, anyways, we are going to use the typical Haggadah which we use, which I actually from a research perspective, it's actually a really great, concise Haggadah, which has a tremendous amount of research behind it, and little constructions and little lines. They do a tremendous job. But I like Haggadahs. I like to read the long ones and everything. We're not going to do the whole thing. There is actually, if someone doesn't attend a Seder, we have this pamphlet this year, which actually has minimal things you're supposed to, absolute minimal things you need to do at the Seder. That became a really strong question last year. A lot of people were not attending a Seder. We wanted to make sure that everyone could do the absolute minimal for the Seder. So the absolute minimal obviously is to eat matzah after nightfall, which is 7:30. And we'll work the other direction. There's a certain couple passages you need to say. The Seder, the first night, luckily for Jerry, it has to end before midnight. That's the law. That's the law. When the clock strikes 12, the Seder, you have to eat the afikoman, the final bit of matzah, which a lot of people don't know, is a very important piece of matzah. If you only have one piece of matzah, you're supposed to eat it for the afikoman. But that has to be done midnight the first night. So midnight nowadays, I'll tell you exactly what time midnight is in Jewish tradition, Jewish law, but that has to be done before midnight. The second night, you can go as late as you'd like. Regardless, so that is the one of the things that we changed this year is I was reading the laws a couple years ago, and I realized that midnight this year is 12:37. So we'll have to end by then. I realized that you have to drink 4 cups of wine. Now, the 4 cups of wine are very unique laws in the Torah. Every Friday night, you're supposed to make kiddush, but if you can't drink wine or grape juice, you're allowed to actually make the kiddush on bread. You can say the blessing on bread and say the same prayers on the wine on bread. On Pesach, the Talmud tells us that even if you will get sick, you have to drink the 4 cups. Most mitzvahs, if you'll get sick, you don't have to do it. Now, the rabbis talk about, well, how sick are we talking about? So in the modern responsa, the Talmud tells a rabbi used to kind of have a headache till Shavuos. That's only 49 days when he would drink wine on Passover, but he would do it anyways. But the rabbis obviously say if you get very ill, then find another way to do it. But I was researching. Now you're supposed to drink the whole cup of wine. So in order to do that, I try and get sweet wine. It's hard to drink 12% wine, a whole cup of wine. Furthermore, I realized that the minimal size cup is only 3 ounces. In Jewish law, it's 3 ounces. Now, 3 ounces is not a lot. It's like a big shot glass. So instead of saying 4 cups of wine, we should say 4 shots of wine. Well, 4 shots of wine isn't difficult. So this year we'll have the typical fake silver kiddush cups, but we're also going to have shot glasses. 3-ounce shot glasses. And that way people can do the mitzvah and it's very easy to drink the 3 ounces of wine. Now, the Seder is something which is so technical. I mean, it's the most technical laws in the Torah. But it's important to remember that every technical part of it has tons of Kabbalistic backing up. It's extremely spiritual experience, which we ingrain in our souls and in our bodies. That's why the Seder is so important. And that's why all the laws of the Seder, I mean, there's some people who literally glow with all these laws and all these details and everything like that. But we want to do it exactly the way that our fathers did it. And that's actually the purpose of our Seder here. We try and, the way I look at it is everyone is kind of like a carrier of COVID, right? A carrier of the Seder. When we do the Seder in the Zach traditional way, we become a carrier to the next generation. It doesn't really matter if you have kids or your kids will see or whatever it is, or you don't. But really, it's like you're becoming a carrier in the world, keeping the Seder alive. So that's what we do. Now, I want to talk about the Shmor Matzah. I would say on Passover, the number one thing that Chabad rabbis make a fuss about are having handmade Shmor Matzah. Now, what is handmade Shmor Matzah and what is the importance of it? I just want to read some excerpts and we'll stop there. We went through a lot of technical things in class today. Now we'll talk about some spiritual things. I would say if someone would ask me, what are the 2 most important preps for Passover they need to do? I would say, number 1, they should get Shmor Matzah, handmade Shmor Matzah. And number two, they should sell their leavened bread, sell their chametz. Those are the two most important mitzvahs. I would say number three is to attend a Seder. Number four, drink 4 cups of wine at the Seder. And the list doesn't end. But the number one thing is the matzah. The Rebbe was very, very, very strongly always pushing people to go deliver matzah to their friends. This week we have some people, and if you know some people who aren't going to get, I'd be happy if you'd come and give some to them, pick up a box and give it to them. It's such an important mitzvah to have shmura matzah on Pesach, and especially in this generation. And that's there's actually a kind of a transition historically, but this is I want to just read some excerpts. So to start off, the Torah tells us, "Ushmartem es hamatzos." You should watch the matzahs. Watch the matzahs. You should watch them. You should keep them. You should guard the matzahs. That is a verse in the Torah. You should guard the matzahs. So what does guarding the matzah mean? Now, first of all, the Torah says you should eat matzah and you shouldn't eat chametz. So the rabbis learned from there that matzah could be made out of any ingredients that chametz could be made out of. Chametz is leavened products. What are leavened products made out of? Well, there's 5 types of grain in the Torah. There is wheat, spelt, barley, oat, and the 5th one, which has skipped my mind. As a result now, in fact, there are people with all sorts of allergies. You have wheat matzah, whole wheat matzah. They now have spelt matzah, and they even have oat matzah. Just to give you an example, the price difference. If you buy American-made matzah, some people like made in America. American-made matzah is much more expensive than Ukrainian or Israeli matzah. If you go to the Jewish community, it's going to cost between $25 and $75 a pound. A pound is about 8 matzahs. That's how much it's going to cost for American-made matzah. If you buy spelt matzah, it's going to probably start at $30 a pound. If you buy oat matzah, it's probably going to start at $30 for 3 matzahs, right? So oat matzah is very expensive. But luckily, they've been able to do this. Now, what's a $70 matzah? There is like infinite amount of, the Torah says to guard your matzahs. So there's like many, many degrees on how much you could guard the matzah, right? There's many, many degrees on how much you could guard the matzah. So the higher you go, the more expensive. Usually, the less they make in a batch and the more expensive it gets. So even though you can have matzah made out of any grain, the rabbis say that preferably wheat is a top choice. Wheat is a top choice in matzah, and spelt and oat is only secondary. I actually bought a box of spelt matzah. Now, this is kind of a funny story. There's someone who comes to the Seder every year, a young lady, which I don't think she's coming this year. She's actually like high risk and she can't get the vaccine for certain reasons. So every year, she always notes that she's a vegan. She's a vegan. I always remember at the Seder, she's a vegan. So now, oat matzah, we have some boxes of oat matzah. Oat matzah costs about $10 a matzah, right? It's kind of expensive, right? So I texted her, I said, you can't eat wheat, right? Because we have oat matzah. She said, no, I try not to eat wheat. I try to stay away from gluten, right? So she tries to stay away from gluten. Now, that was very interesting. A lot of people nowadays, especially youth, are like into gluten-free diets. A lot of people are into gluten-free diets. So that was very interesting because I looked at the box of oat matzah and it said, this is only for people who are wheat intolerant. This is not for people who like to be gluten-free. This is people who are wheat intolerant. So I researched it and I found it very interesting. When it comes to matzah, it's meant to be made out of wheat. Now, oat is okay, but that's only secondary. So, it was just kind of funny. I realized that I have to be careful how I word what I'm saying because we're looking for people who are gluten intolerant, not gluten-free. So now I'll talk about just how the matzah is made. Now, the word is called shmura matzot, shmura matzah. When you go to the store, you will find matzah, which is in a box, and it's square matzah, right? Square matzah. What is the difference between that and shmura matzah? So there's a few differences. One difference is the matzah in a square box is made by a machine. It's made by a machine. You can watch the videos online of Manischewitz or Yehuda matzah. You can actually online, I was going to actually share, but there's really like tons of videos of them baking matzah, all the different types of places and ways. It's very, very interesting. A lot of people in the Jewish communities like to go themselves to bake their own matzah. That's considered, so you can make your own and make sure that it's totally kosher and use whatever stringencies you want. So the square matzah is machine matzah. Now, what is the problem with machine matzah? It's kosher. Machine matzah is perfectly kosher. But there are two problems. Number one, when you make the matzah, it's a mitzvah to make the matzah, right? You're preparing for a mitzvah. So when you make matzah, one is supposed to have intention and think about the fact they're making a matzah. There's a lot of mitzvahs that if you don't think about them while you're doing it, you didn't do the mitzvah properly. I'll give you an example. If you eat in the sukkah, and you don't think about the fact that you're doing a mitzvah by sitting in a sukkah, you didn't do the mitzvah properly. Likewise, tefillin. If you put tefillin on, you don't think about it all for a second and realize, hey, I'm doing a mitzvah, so you're lacking in the mitzvah. So it's the same thing with matzah. When you're making matzah, you are meant to have in mind that you're doing a mitzvah. In fact, if you go to a matzah bakery, there's different types of matzah bakeries. Some matzah bakeries have rabbis baking the matzah. Some matzah bakeries have older women from the community bake the matzah. In New York, in the Crown Heights Bakery, which is a place you could actually visit. They cook for most of the year, bake matzah most of the year. A lot of times they have elderly Russian ladies baking the matzah. They're constantly reminding them, we're doing this for the mitzvah. When you have machine matzah, a machine can't really have intention to do a mitzvah, right? Because it's not really a human. You can program it to say it and everything like that. Now, what can you do? You can have whoever presses the button to start the machine have intention, right? So there were some rabbis in the previous generations in Russia, they were already having machine matzah in Eastern Europe, who said, when someone pushes the button, that's kind of like a rolling pin. When I roll matzah with a rolling pin, right? I'm not rolling the matzah, the rolling pin is. I'm just powering the rolling pin. Other people said, so they said, when you push the button, if you have intention to do the mitzvah, ultimately it's for the sake of a mitzvah. Other rabbis, a majority of rabbis said, there's a line of how far the intention needs to be from actually doing it, right? In other words, when you're rolling the pin, you're active in it. When you press a button, the machine could go on for hours and days, right? So a square matzah is kosher for Passover, albeit as long as it says it on the box. Unfortunately, every year people call me and they say, hey, I went to Walmart and bought matzah and it says not kosher for Passover. Is it kosher for Passover, right? But square matzah is kosher for Passover. Now, the prerequisites of making something kosher for Passover is that it has to bake in under 18 minutes. From the moment the flour and water mix together, you have 18 minutes till it's baked. There's actually someone who's into science once told me that in the art of making sourdough bread, when you make a sourdough starter, 18 minutes is how long it takes for the grains of flour to absorb the water, right? But there's actually a chemical reaction in around 18 minutes. But anyways, the tradition is, in Jewish tradition, is 18 minutes from the time the matzah, the water is mixed till it's baked. If you look at a matzah bakery, you actually see they do 18-minute shifts. They say, on your mark, get set. They mix it. They do everything really fast. Everyone's running around. They're trying to make as many matzahs and everything like that. 18 minutes end. Take a breath. Okay, next shift, and they usually get rid of all the bowls and everything, and they have those cleaned out and dried, and they bring out a new set, and they're all ready to get working again. 18 minutes. Now, in the olden days, actually, women used to just make bread in under 18 minutes. If they mix flour and water and bake it in under 18 minutes. And matzah was soft, and actually it was thick also. What happened was, and they called it masa. This is actually very interesting. What happened was over time, Jewish people said, they lost the tradition of how to make this matzah bread. They weren't sure. If you bake it in under 18 minutes, it's not chametz. Even if it's bread, even if it looks like challah, it's not chametz. The problem is how do you know it's fully baked inside through and through? right? We don't know. So rabbis said, it used to be the women had the tradition passed down from the Jewish people in Egypt and everything like that. They used to know how to do it. But because because we're in exile and everything like that, we lost the tradition of exactly how to do it. So most of the Ashkenazi rabbis ruled that matzah has to be really thin and hard. That's where we get our really thin and hard matzah. The Sephardim, on the other hand, many Sephardim nowadays, in the Code of Jewish Law, it says if your tradition is to eat thin, hard matzah, then you're not allowed to deviate from that. When it's very thin, you can be certain that there's no dough that wasn't baked, right? But the Sephardim actually nowadays, there are a lot of Sephardim who actually bake matzah, thick, soft matzah, and they eat it on Passover. They actually sell it online. I once saw a website, a Sephardic website, and it said, ask your rabbi before you buy our matzahs, because a lot of people buy it and they'll find out that it's actually not allowed. The Yemenite women traditionally had the tradition for many, many years. Some say the Yemenite women, because the Yemenite women only left 70 years ago, they had the tradition of how to bake the soft matzah. It's such a thing called soft matzah. We as Ashkenazim, we don't eat soft matzah. We eat it very baked, oftentimes burnt, right? We eat it very baked and oftentimes burnt, but so as long as we know that there's absolutely no flour left. So going back to shmura matzah. Shmura matzah means that it is washed. The minimal amount of guarded time is from the time you mix the water in it, someone is guarding it to make sure it doesn't rise. It doesn't pass the 18 minutes. However, true shmura matzah is actually at least from the time that they grind it. They make sure that it doesn't come in contact with any water. Now, it's very possible that you buy in the store may have come in contact with a drop of water, a tiny drop of water, right? And chametz is an unusual thing which is forbidden. Most Jewish things which are forbidden, if they mix with a kosher substance, they become null if it's less than a certain amount. Chametz never becomes null on Passover, so we're very strict. Nowadays, we actually get the highest level of shmur matzah. We make sure it doesn't come in contact of water from the time that it was harvested. They have special harvesting of the wheat and grinding and everything like that, and they have rabbis watching it, making sure that it doesn't come in contact with water in the mills or anything like that. It's a really funny thing to note, but in New York, they have special Arizona matzah. There are wheat fields near Yuma or Tombstone or wheat fields there, which are super dry. And some Jews like to eat from those super dry fields. And they send rabbis every year to go and harvest the wheat there. And I even saw in New York, I saw boxes of matzah that said made from Arizona wheat. Right? All right. So now go into the history. So shmura matzah means matzah where the wheat was technically at best washed from the time of harvest, right? It never got wet from the time of harvest. That's what shmura matzah is. In Russia and Europe, it was difficult to come across actual shmur matzah. One of the really beautiful things that we have nowadays is now every Jew can go to Chabad and get a free box of shmur matzah, which is greater matzah than our ancestors used to be able to eat. Nowadays, we've worked it out to businesses and everything like that. Now, so the more it's guarded, the more kosher it is. So in the Code of Jewish Law, it says, let's say you have a bunch of matzah, which is not shmura from the time of harvesting or for the time of grinding, right? And you have one matzah, you should keep that matzah for the afikomen, the last thing you eat at the Seder night, you should have that matzah. So nowadays, if you have square matzah and then you have the round matzah and you're eating the square matzah at the Seder, you should keep your circle matzah, your handmade matzah, for the end, because that is the matzah of mitzvah. Two reasons why. Number one is the people who made it, they injected the mitzvah energy in it while they were making it. And number two, they watched the flour from the time of harvesting. That is all in the Jewish legal side of shmur matzah. Now I just want to talk about the Kabbalistic side of shmur matzah and why the Rebbe was so adamant in telling people you have to get matzah to every Jew. Personally, I feel that as a Chabad rabbi, a lot of things are himmeldik. A lot of things are heavenly. Just in the history of being a rabbi, my short history, you meet people, a lot of times they're not interested in Judaism. They come back later, they suddenly show up, suddenly they're very interested, they leave, they come back. It's almost beyond understanding sometimes. And sometimes no one knows why, not even themselves. I feel a lot of it has to do with matzah. The Zohar says that the watched matzah is the matzah of faith and the matzah of healing, food of faith and food of healing. There was, I can't vouch by it, but there were a lot of people. The Zohar says, the Zohar is the Kabbalistic treatise, the most famous Kabbalistic book that we have. The Zohar says that when you eat matzah, you get faith. Furthermore, when you eat matzah, it also heals. Traditionally, the first night it gives you faith, the second night it heals. Now, I'm no miracle worker, but there were many people who were sick and the Rebbe gave special matzah to them and he said, eat it on the Seder, and they got better. And there are many people, the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe did the same. There was a doctor in Crown Heights who was the Rebbe's doctor. He was a very colorful personality. He was a real brilliant doctor. In fact, some of his, I can show Jerry next time he's here, some of his studies in Europe were published and are still like known to be proper studies. And actually one of the things which he was a pioneer in is nutrition. Nutrition, helping health. A lot of people, that was kind of a new subject over there. But he was a follower of the Rebbe, and a lot of times people would come to him and they'd say, we got a blessed, the Rebbe told me to come to you. And when you do that, he'd say, okay, well, the Rebbe blessed them, so I don't have to do much to help them as a doctor, Sometimes there are people he felt he couldn't heal, but the Rebbe gave a blessing, and he said, oh, if the Rebbe gave you a blessing, then it must be something I have. So he used to actually give out matzah of the Rebbe as healing. So again, matzah is the food of faith and the food of healing. This is a tradition that the previous Rebbe said is only when it comes to the handmade shmur matzah. Handmade shmur matzah. Now, in a certain era, the Rebbes started saying, as it became more available, they started saying every Jew needs to eat the most strict adhered shmur matzah, matzah which is watched from the time of harvesting. Our great-great-great-grandparents rarely had that. A lot of times they would just take flour, which they figured didn't have any water in it, right? Because usually flour doesn't, and they would use that. But they said, no, nowadays every Jew has to eat real strict shmur matzah. The previous Rebbe said, why is that? Well, matzah represents faith. Matzah represents faith. Now, faith in Judaism is not a rational thing, and it is not something which you kind of understand. It's actually what you don't understand. Faith is a sense that we have which transcends our intellectual capabilities. It's something which we naturally have above us. Faith is the absolute trust the Jewish people and even humanity has in God underneath everything, when you uncover everything. Unfortunately, a lot of times faith only comes out when we are in dire situations. It's the calm mentality that Jews have in dire situations in the Holocaust and wherever it is. That is what faith is. Now, matzah, what it does is faith comes from your soul. Faith is a transcendent part of your soul, which goes and it kind of is our life force. When we eat matzah, two things happen, the previous Rebbe said. Number one, our body becomes a reciprocal for our soul. Our body becomes a reciprocal for our soul. So now our body is able to take in more faith. The other thing that happens is our soul becomes a more powerful force. These are the two things that happen when we eat matzah. Now, why is it specifically matzah that gives us faith? So if you look in the Torah right now, there's only one mitzvah in the whole Torah, which is a mitzvah that you need to eat something. Most of the other mitzvahs, you need to eat something. Let's say kosher. You don't need to eat kosher. You need to eat, right? Well, what are you allowed to eat? You're only allowed to eat kosher, right? Most of the other food-related mitzvahs are not an obligation. They're a rabbinic obligation, tradition. The only biblical obligation, food obligation, is matzah. When we eat, it becomes part of our flesh. It becomes part of our blood. The nutrients become part of our flesh and blood. So matzah is the only mitzvah where God says in the Torah, you got to eat this matzah. And we eat it and it actually becomes part of our body, right? And that's why it breeds faith in us. It actually strengthens spirituality in our bodies and gives us spirituality. So that is why I feel always that the more people we give matzah to before Passover, the more people come and show up at different things throughout the year or have different religious needs. throughout the year, right? So that is the mitzvah of Shmur Matzah. The second night is the food of healing.
The rice matzah.
Matzah is the food of healing. After your body gets more spirituality, then it can heal. But we're going to stop here. So that is the significance of Shmur Matzah. If you know any Jewish people who need it, I have a couple of volunteers driving around this week. Hopefully they'll finish the job, bringing matzah to everybody. Even if you're coming to the Seder the first night here, if you're not going to be here the second night, it's good to have matzah for the second night as well. That way, you can have the bread of healing. But matzah is a very precious mitzvah because it's literally a commandment which becomes part of our flesh. It's like a commandment. It's the only biblical commandment of something that we must eat at a certain time. So this is, I'll just finish off with an anecdote. So we have two Seders. So the first Seder, I try and keep it similar every year so people know what to expect. And we try and do things quickly. We try and have everything ready. This year, we're going to do it to the best of our ability. And it's a quick Seder. There's a lot of family members that I have who said if they come here, they're going to have their own Seder after because it's too quick. Yeah. The second Seder, I usually try and take my time. The first Seder we can prepare before the holiday, but the second Seder, you're not allowed to prepare before nightfall. So this Seder, we're going to do our best to prepare on Friday and then put it aside. And then Saturday night, we'll move it all and it's all ready. But the second Seder, you can't prepare on Friday. That's too far in advance and you can't prepare the day of. So it always ends up later. Also, I like to give more attention to my kids the second Seder and see what they have to say. So it always goes longer. And then sometimes 12:30, 1:30, always interesting people come to the second Seder. So this year, there's a guy who I barely know who came Hanukkah time and he RSVP'd to the second Seder. So he came to drop off a check and to pick up matzah for the first Seder, right? So I told him, I said, I think that it'll be more your style to come to the first Seder because the first Seder is not like your grandfather's Seder, but the second Seder is your grandfather's Seder. So he told me, he said, I can't. I'm a drummer at the Saturday night. I have a gig in Mike's Saloon. So I told him, I said, okay, here's the deal. I told him, just let you know, the second Seder might be a little slow, but bear with me. It'll be fun. We'll have a good time. A lot of times when we're just looking at the clock, it's hard to have fun. But when we go and we get involved, time flies. So I told him about the second Seder. And I said, here's matzah for the first night. Even if you're not going to be at the Seder, remember to eat this matzah after nightfall. So I said, better yet, if you're going to be at Matt's Saloon, you should announce that if anyone is Jewish there, you'll give them some matzah as well. So he said he's going to do that. So you never know where matzah spreads and you never know whose soul it's going to awaken. And that's one of the beautiful things of Passover. All right. Anyways,